Hey, what's up, guys? Today we're going to go over how to build a website using any API you want. Today we're going to use the MyAnimeList API, as well as we're going to use React.js as our front-end framework to build out the website. Hope you like it, and let's get into it. All right, guys, so the first thing we want to do is actually create the React app. So all we want to do is go into the directory we want to go into. So I'm going to go into my downloads folder, downloads, and I'm going to look in here, and then I'm just going to create React app. If you don't already have React app, you want to go to the React website and you want to do npx install React, create React app, and then it'll be a local function for you so you can call it whenever you need it. So now we're going to do create React app, and we're going to create our React app. So I'm going to call it AnimeList viewer. And it'll take a second to get created here. All right, so once that's done, now you can go to your Visual Studio Code is an editor that I like to use. You can use whatever editor that you have, but I'm gonna use Visual Studio Code here. And now we can open up AnimeList Viewer right here, and then we can click open. And so in here, there's gonna be a couple useless files that we don't really need. So I'm gonna get rid of them. So the app.css, app.test, the index.css, the logo SVG, service worker, setup test.js. These are all files that we don't actually need. So we're going to delete these and we're going to move it to trash. And so next, what we want to do is to install some dependencies that we have. So all I need to do is hit Control Tab on VS Code and it'll open up our in console terminal right here. And so now the dependencies we're going to need for this project are, okay, instead of CSS, I like to use node Sass. So we're going to use node Sass. It's basically the same idea, but say you're using something like Bootstrap or something like that. You can import their CSS library directly into Sass versus using CSS where you can't import it directly. You'd have to import it as a link tag or something like that, or a style sheet tag within your actual HTML file. So this just makes your life a little bit easier if you're doing those kinds of implementations. So now we're going to do npm install node Sass, actually npm install node Sass, and then another thing we want is material UI. So we're going to get material UI. We're going to say at material /UI, -UI /core. And then we're also going to get the icon version of this. So we're going to get its icons, material, UI, and then we're going to get icons. And another library we're going to need is React Router DOM. So we want to say React Router DOM. This is very useful if you have different routes on your website, basically. So once we do that, we can hit npm install and it should download all these packages for us. All right, so once that's all installed, now we can get into actually developing this out. So now we can open up the index.js and we can remove the service worker stuff since we just got rid of that file, as well as remove this. And we can also remove the index.css and instead actually replace that with SCSS since we have some Sass in here. And just because of that, now we can add a index.scss file. So index.scss file. So this is just creating a CSS file, which is Sass. So now we can save that. And while we're at it, let's add this style. We're going to add a little background color. And so we're going to say just the super simple styling for this background color. And we're going to say background color #444, and you could actually leave it like that, I think, but just to complete it, we're going to add some more 4s, and that'll be basically the same color. For anything that has repeating digits, for like the last 3 digits that are the same as the front, I think you can just leave them. So I think that's the same for black and white. So if it's FFF, you'll get the same color for white. and the same for black, which is 0, 0, 0, and you'll get the same thing. So that's just a quick hack there, but I like putting all 6 anyway. So then we can save that, and then let's get to the app.js here, and let's remove this CSS file. We'll probably add another CSS file actually for that. No, actually we don't need one. So let's just remove that, and let's remove the SVG, as well as instead of this div, let's literally clear this out. And let's just put, for right now, we're just gonna put hello world, and we're gonna save that, and that's about it for right now. And let's just run it just to make sure that's all working. So we just type in npm start in our terminal here, and that gets this going. All right, so as you can see, there's hello world right here. So now we're gonna make this a little bit more intricate and start getting into routing. And so we're gonna do actually a few things here. We're not only gonna get into routing, we're also gonna we're gonna actually start by setting up our navigation and routing. So let's do that. So let's start by going into our source folder, and we're gonna create 3 folders here. So we're gonna do a components folder. So we're going to set up our components folder. And then we're also going to set up a folder called utils, or context, sorry. We're going to set up a folder called context. And then we're also going to set up a folder called pages. So I just like breaking down my apps into these 3. You can break them down even further if you have more stuff, but we're only going to have really like 3 pages in this. So it's going to be super simple. So we're going to have pages for like the different routes we're going to have. So we're going to have these be kind of our placeholders for the different routes. Our context will be for how our data is going to flow. So we're going to have that where we have a general reference to a bunch of data. This is a really useful thing. It'll be something called use context, which is a React hook. And I'll get more into that once we get there. And then for components, these are just general components that we're going to pass in to our different pages. So this makes it so you can reuse these components multiple times. So we're not just dependent on one page having the same components. I mean, we can have multiple pages with the same components. So we can put all those reused components in one folder. Or even if they're not reused, I like putting them in that components folder anyway. So let's get into actually building out each of these pages. So let's build out 3 pages for this application. We're going to have 3 pages. We're going to have the home page, the results page, and then the single view page. So let's set those 3 routes up. So let's create one. It'll be home.js. And then it'll be next will be the results.js. And then we want the single view. Single view.js. All right, and then in each of these files, we can just set up something quick. So I have this extension called React Snippets, and when I say RSC, what that does is it just gives me a basic functional component. And so that'll just give me that, and then I can just say home for the home page. For the results page, I can do the same exact thing. As you can see, this makes your life really fast. So you can set up these pages pretty quickly. And I'm going to say this is single view. So now we got our 3 pages set up here. So now a thing that we want to set up is the main navigation. And I'll be honest with you guys, the main navigation is pretty simple. But all we need to do here is we're going to add a file, and it will be called main navigation.js. And the reason it's simple is because I just copied it from the Material UI website. So that makes your life super easy. So let's just do that right now. So I'm going to go to Material UI and I'm going to go to App Bar, as you can see in the top. And the one I copied was this one right here. And I copied this almost exactly. I just made a few changes here and there. So let's copy this. We're going to copy source. And then we're going to Control V. And as simple as that, now we're going to have an app bar here. And so when we want to display our app bar, we're going to need to use these routes. So before we continue editing this main navigation, let's actually set up our routes now. So we're going to have 3 main routes, as I said before. So to do all this stuff, we're going to need to import our stuff from React Router DOM. So let's import a few things here. So we're going to import browser router as router. So this is our first import. Our next import will be route, and then our next one will be redirect. And the last one will be switch. And then this was all from React Router DOM. And boom. So now we have everything imported from React Router DOM. And so now we want to also import our 3 pages that we have. So we need to import those 3. So we're going to import home first, home from // and we want to go to pages and get home. And there's a quick hack. If you press Alt Shift on VS Code, you can copy that down. And instead of home, we want results now. And then results again. And then we can get single view now. Single view. Alright, so now we have everything we need imported at the moment. Alright, so now when we want to set up our actual routes, what we're going to need to do is set up our router around them. So router is basically a container for all the different pages we're going to go to. So as you know, we can't return multiple React components. So if you've done React before, you can't return multiple React components. You need something to contain all of those components you could be returning, right? So basically, router is kind of a container where you can return multiple pages, but you're not actually returning multiple pages, as you'll see once we get into it. You're gonna be returning kind of different parts of a page. So at the main top, what we're going to actually import is our main navigation here. Since we set up that main navigation, that's super easy to just plug in right here. So main navigation, I realized I didn't import this. So I should import that right now. Let's import that as well. Import main navigation from our components folder. And that should be all good. From our components, / main navigation. All right, so now from this route, we have our main navigation here, and inside of this, what we're gonna put is a main tag. This just separates kind of where the majority of your content is from your nav bar. This isn't super necessary, but I just like putting it. So we're gonna now we're gonna do a switch. So what a switch is between your different routes, it will know which route to go to based on what's in the URL. So the switch statement will take in the URL as, it's almost like a case statement. If you've done any other language, there's a lot of case statements involved. So this is a JSX version of that almost. And so what it's going to do is it's going to take in the path and it'll be like, okay, this path matches which route I should return. So now with this first switch statement, inside of here, now we're going to put a route. So let's set up a route. And this route path will be the home path. So this path is just the / path. And then we're going to say exact. So this route won't go anywhere else it has to be the exact path of /, and this is going to return home. And that's super simple. So now we can basically just copy all this 3 times, and we can just swap these out with results and single view. And instead of results, we want to say results here, and we want to put single view right here, single view. So now basically our 3 routes are set up: the home page, the results page, and the single view page. And we're going to add a redirect here. And so all the redirect is doing is, if you're on any other route, it'll just redirect you home. So that's the whole idea, that people won't be kind of URL searching around your website. Just makes it super simple. And we can close that. And boom, so now our routes are all set up. So just to verify that this is all set up, let's go to our localhost. And so right now we're at home. So now let's go to results. And as you can see, results is returning results. And let's go to single view. And as you can see, single view is also returning. So boom, our routes are all set up here. Now let's get into actually coding out some of these pages, right? So now something I want to get into is using context, as I talked about earlier. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to create our context for searching. So searching, as you can see, it's used twice in our application. You can't see this yet, but one place I'm going to have it where you can search is actually on the home page. I'm just going to put a search bar here. And the second place we're going to have a search is up in this main navigation. So a way where you can use this context is that you can put functions in there where you can access in different components without having to pass it in as a prop all the time. So you can just use these in different parts of your project without needing to kind of call the data over and over again, right? So you're always going to be able to reference this data as long as you import the proper context file. So that's kind of what we're going to do here. So we're going to set up this context. So the first thing we want to set up is actually our search function itself before we get too much into actually the context stuff. So let's get something real quick called useState. So useState from React. So this is a hook that manages state for us. This basically manages state for us, so we don't have to do all that component stuff. It'll manage state within a functional component. So it's actually super, super helpful and makes everything really clean. So with useState, we want to set up a few variables here that we're going to be using all over the place. So we're going to set up const, and we're going to say anime data, and this will be set anime data as our data setter. And we're going to use state, and inside of here we're just going to pass an array because that's what the data is going to come back. And we're going to do const, and there'll be also single data for our single view page, and we're going to use set single data. And we're also going to use state, and this data is going to come back as a array. And another function we want to set up is const set data. So the reason we have to set these up is because you can't necessarily you can't use these functions in the context. What you need to do is actually call on these functions outside of the context. Basically you can't use these functions when passed into context because they're not necessarily a regular function. They're kind of a React built-in function. So what we need to do to use this is we actually need to call this within here. So we're going to use set anime data, and we're going to set that data in there. And we're going to do the same for set single. So we're going to say const set single, and we're going to pass in the data here. And we're going to set single data, and we're going to pass in data. So what all that's doing again is it's just going to be calling on these React hooks to set the actual data for the results page and the single page. So now we're going to also set up our actual search functionality. And so just to make this super simple and so we can understand it right away, we're going to do const search equals search term. So we're just going to pass in the search term to this, and we're going to say return fetch. So fetch is actually an asynchronous function. So due to this, we're going to need to use a then on this response, or we could await. We could use an async function on this. So we could create this entire search function to be an async function, and then we could await for the promise to go through. But instead of doing that, all I'm going to do is attach a then. And what the then does is it'll wait for that promise to go through and then send the data on the then. So the endpoint we're going to hit is https://API. And I'm not going to read this all off. I'll just paste this in here and you guys can see it. So let's paste that in. And for right now, we're going to limit it to 20. I can get into further videos, maybe in a video in the future where we can paginate this API. But for right now, we're going to keep it super simple. And then we're going to do a then response on it, as I said earlier. And what the then is going to capture is whatever response data that came through on the promise. And we're going to do an arrow function, and then we're going to say response.json. And we're going to convert that data into a JSON. And boom, now we have our search functionality all set up. So how do we exactly pass this into our entire application here, right? So basically our entire application is here. So what we want to use now is called a context provider. So what we want to do is now go to the context folder that I was talking about earlier, and we're going to set up something called search.js. And this is going to set up our reference points for, it's almost like a function declaration if you've done C or something like that. It's very, very similar to that. So here we're going to use a React hook called create context. So import create context, and from React, and super simply we're going to say export const search context, and we're going to say create context, and inside of here we're going to pass an object, and inside of this object we're going to call our few items that we set up earlier in app.js right here. We're going to call all these items in here so we can reference all of these throughout our entire application. So we're going to first set up anime data, and we're going to say that's an array like we talked about, and then we're going to do single data for a single view, and then pass an object to that, and then also we're going to do search. So this is our general search function, and this is just going to be a simple arrow function, as well as set data is also going to be an arrow function here. And set single will also be an arrow function. So like I said earlier, this is basically just a declaration, and we defined what these actually are in our app.js. But we need this declaration so we can reference it throughout our entire application. So that's just for reference basically. And so now that we have our reference set up, all we need to do here is we actually can say import search context from /context and search. And boom, now we have access to all of our data in our app.js right now. So now what we need to do that we have access throughout our entire application is we're going to do something called a context provider. So in here, we're going to say search context dot provider. So this is providing data basically, right? And we're going to pass in a value parameter here. And inside of this value parameter, we're going to actually pass an object. And inside of this object, we're going to say our few items. So search and then anime data. So these are all the functions that we want access through in our entire application, like we said before. And these are the ones that we're going to be passing in here so that we have access to it all over. Set single. So now that we have that set up, we just need to close it off here. So let's actually get this and plug that in right here and save that. And single data is not defined. Set single. Single data. Where did I do a, oh, I did a little typo here. Single data. And save that. Single data. Okay, that's all. That's spelled correctly over there. All right, cool. So now that we have this search context wrapped around our entire application, this is all set up. So now that we have that all set up, we can actually start developing our application here. So now let's get into our home.js file. So here we're going to be using a few things. But before I even get into that, let's just see what data we're getting back and how we access that data from our API that we just fetched our data from. So let's do this real quick where we're going to say handles. We're going to just get a quick result from our search. So we're going to need a React hook again. And this React hook will be called use context like we talked about before. So use context, and then we're going to say const search equals use context. And then we're also going to need search context. I almost forgot about it. So let's get that. So search context imported automatically because of VS Code, another awesome part about VS Code. So something you might want to look at if you're interested in downloading a different IDE. VS Code is absolutely awesome. So another thing that we can look at real quick is called use effect. And use effect will be just for us to see this right now. We're going to remove it later. We don't really need it in this part of our application. So use effect actually just runs during the first time the page loads, and then it'll run again if some dependency changes later. So if you add no dependencies, it'll only run at the beginning when the page loads itself. So just to test out our search function, I'm just going to use effect. And inside of here, what you want to do is you want to pass in an arrow function. And in addition to that arrow function, you want to pass in an array. And that array will be of the dependencies, but in this case, we don't have any, right? So all now we need to do is set up our search function. So we're going to say search. And now inside of this search constant we have right here, it'll be all of our functions as well as our different data points, our data sets that we have right here, right? So say we want to access our search function, it'll be called search.search. So let's go to search and let's say search.search. And we're going to put in our input. So I'm going to just put in something simple. I'm going to say Naruto. Let's put in Naruto here. And then we're going to click on then. And then now we want to pass in an arrow function. So data, arrow function, and let's do this. And then let's print this out, console.log, and then let's get this data here. So again, what this function is a promise. It's going to return a promise on the search. So on the search again, we don't want it to do anything crazy. So I'm just going to wait for it to come through, the data to come through on the promise, and then I'm going to log it, right? So that's basically all I'm going to do right here, right now. And let's just take a look at here. Oh, yeah. Oh, shoot. I forgot that a dependency here will be search, obviously, but search isn't gonna change. So that's a dependency that we need, but if it did change, that's why it kind of needs this, because we use search inside of here. So let's check out what data we're getting back right now. So it's getting an object, and then inside of here, it's gonna be a result. And inside of the result, we can see all this different data about our different shows that we're getting back. So this is the data that we're going to be using. So in our case, you can see some cool stuff is you can just pull up, you can take one of these URLs, you can go to it, and it'll just be of the image. So that'll be pretty cool. So this is Naruto Shippuden. So that's pretty sick right there. So we got some image data, we got some scoring data, we got some start dates, we have a general like synopsis of what it is, stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. So that's pretty sick right there. So now that we saw what data we're getting back, let's actually get into building out this home page here. So that data is really cool. So let's get into building the home page here, right? All right, so to start off by building this home page, what we want to do is, so to start off by building our home page here, what we want to do is actually import a few things from Material UI. So what we're going to import is a few things right here. So we're going to say import, and we're going to do form control. And we're going to say input, and then we're going to say icon button, as well as a grid. And then we're going to import that from at Material UI core. And that's all we're going to need right now. And so let's also, now we're going to set up our grid. So if you're not familiar with Material UI, there's this thing called a grid. And basically, it's the same thing as a CSS grid, if you've done that before. And that is a super simple idea of breaking down the page into different parts. So to span the entire page, you could do something like grid, and then like the size is 12, because it breaks it down into 12 units of every web page. So that makes like your page very dynamic, and you don't need to worry about sizing things to an exact pixel or things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to call our outer grid a container, and we're going to say our direction is column is equal to column, as well as we're going to justify center, and then we're going to align item center, and we're going to align content center, align content center, as well as items. And basically all we're doing is we're going to load an image right here, we're going to load an image right here, as well as a URL right there. So let's do this. So align items, and we're going to say align items center. All right. So once we've done that, now we want to break it down into another basic unit right here. So we're going to do another grid, but this is going to be a grid item. And basically it's saying it's a part of, so the outer one's a container, and then this is an item of that container. So this is basically just going to center all our objects, whatever objects we put inside of this item right here. So then we're going to put another 2 items in here, and we're going to call them grid. And this will be another item. And we're going to put another item right here, grid, as well as call this an item as well. All right, so there's 2 items in there. Nothing done yet with these items. So we're going to say that we're going to call this image, and we're going to call this one search bar. Search bar. So let's make sure that's looking right. All right, so cool. So image and search bar, they're right here. They're fit to the center. So that's all we needed right now. And so let's start by getting an image. So all I did was I looked up Luffy PNG on Google right here, and getting that from there, I went to images, And I just snagged one of these images. I can't remember which image it was. I think it was, where was that image? Right here. So I just went here and then I said open image in, not new window, I said new tab right here. A new tab. And I just downloaded this image from here. And so I already have the image in another file, so I'm just going to copy that image. Let's copy that image and then plug it in into our public folder. And then let's paste that in. All right, so boom, now we have our image. And so with that image, how we're going to access that image is actually very interesting. And it's an interesting way to do it because I didn't know how to do this initially. So we're going to say image and we're going to give it an alt. And since it's Luffy, we're going to say Luffy. And we're going to give it a source. So the interesting part about this is the source part. So we're going to say process.env, and then we're going to say .public URL, and we're going to say plus our Luffy image, right? So now we're going to say Luffy.png here. So something actually nicer than this, what we can do is we can actually wrap this entire thing in these kind of side ticks, or these horizontal, or yeah, I guess they're kind of ticks, they're back ticks, right? So then we can wrap this inside of some brackets, and then we can also say, we can also add this $sign, and what this is basically just super simple string interpolation. And we can also do the same thing with this, and we can wrap that and pass this right here, and then we can just add a / right there and remove this, and boom, we have that right there. Our image is all set. But another thing I wanted to do is also set the height and width, because the height and width are very strange on this image. So I'm going to set it to 420, and I'm going to do width of equal to, I'm going to set width equal to, oh shoot, I realized I didn't have an outer bracket right there. And I'm going to set my width equal to, oh, I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, width, and then let's do that. Oh, I have an extra bracket right there. All right, so width equal to 550. All right, so now let's save all of that. So now that that is all good, oh, I need a ./ here. No, that should work. Luffy.png. Oh, I can just leave that as a string. I don't know why I interpolated that part. I just need to interpolate that beginning. All right, so yeah, you don't need to interpolate that second part. I don't know why I did that. So now that we didn't need to interpolate that part, so oh, shoot. So we didn't need to interpolate that part. So here's how's the image is looking right now. So that's all good. So now let's get into the search bar stuff. So this is where it starts getting interesting. So one more thing that we want to get real quick is the search icon. Super easy to get. Again, all we need to do is import search icon from @material UI, and instead of core, we're going to say icons, and we want to say search. And boom, now we have the search icon here. So what we want to start by doing is actually setting up a form inside of this search bar here. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a form. So we're going to call this form, and we're going to hit enter, and inside of this we're going to have a form control. So that's something we imported earlier. Oh wait, no, actually we haven't imported that from Material UI. Oh, we did. Yeah, so that's something we imported earlier from Material UI. And we're going to say form control, and we're going to do type equals submit, and we're going to close that off, and we're going to hit enter, and then now we're going to create an input. And inside of this input, we're going to put a few things. So let's actually close it off first. We don't need actually this second tag. So we're gonna say that, and then we're gonna add a placeholder, and then we're gonna say equals search for your favorite anime, dot dot dot. So that's our placeholder, and we're gonna say value equals input. So we're gonna get into where that comes in a second. We haven't set that up here. And then we're gonna say on change. We're not gonna do anything right now with this on change. We need to set up a few things before this, but we're gonna set it to an empty object right here, and then we're gonna do, and that's it for that. And after that, we can add an icon button that we just got in here, icon button. And inside of our icon button, we want to put our search icon. So now we're good with that. And in our icon, we want to add a few things. We want to say variant equals, and we're going to say contained. So this is just a different type of icon from the Material UI library. You can look more into these libraries later. We're not gonna dive too much into that right now. I'm just kind of showing you guys how you can build your own website using an API. So that makes it super simple. Type equals submit, and then we want to say this will be disabled if there's no input in here, right? So if there's not an input. And again, we haven't defined what input is yet, but we will in 1 second here. And then we're going to add an input. We're going to add an on-click handler in case you click on the search button. And we're going to say handle search. We're going to call this handle search. Handle search. All right. So now that we have all that set up, yeah, it's going to say, all right, we have a bunch of errors because we have none of this set up yet. But now we're going to actually set this stuff up. So let's start by actually setting up our input stuff. So we can actually comment that out right now. We're going to get back to that in a second. And so what we're going to create is something called our input. So we're going to say const, and this is our input for actually, so this is our input for what we're taking into the form. So we're going to use this use state effect again, or we're going to use this use state hook again. Use state, and in this hook, initially the input is empty, so we're going to set it to empty. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to create our handle search function. So with our handle search function, what we want to do is we want to say const handle search, and we're going to say equals, and we're going to pass in our event. So our event is actually what event is happening. So in our case, it's our on-click event, right? And so this will get translated into an arrow function and pass it here. Right now, event is deprecated. Okay, never mind. It's not deprecated anymore. That was strange. All right, so now, so on our submit, we don't actually want it where usually when you have a submit function, what it'll do is it'll just refresh the page. We don't want that actually to be happening. So we only want that, we don't want that to be happening. We want to kind of manage where our page goes, and we want to have a single page application so that we don't want any refreshes actually to be happening. So to prevent that from happening, we want to set up event.prevent default. And this is just a built-in JavaScript function where it's not going to allow the page to refresh when we submit our form here. And so now what we want to add is actually our on change to our input. So currently whenever you add something into here, our input's not actually changing. So we want it to change every time, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to pass in our event, and we're going to say every time our input changes, we want to actually set that value to our input value. So we're going to use our set input, and we're going to say event.target. So event.target is actually getting what's inside of the event. So the event was an on change, And so we're going to get what's inside of that basically. And we're going to get our target and we're going to get the value of what that is. And so we're going to set our input to that. And once we do that, our input stuff is basically all set up. And let's look at how it looks right now. So right now it looks very ugly. So let's add a little bit of styling here. So the first piece of styling we want to add is on the form. Let's add a bit of styling here. So let's call this class name, and we're going to call it home underscore form underscore actually home underscore form, and we're going to add it to this input as well, and we're going to say class name equals home underscore input, and then we're also going to add it to the icon button here, and let's set class name home underscore icon button. And let's save all of that. And right now there's actually no CSS file for this. So let's add one. So let's do home.scss. And inside of here, we're going to add our few CSS classes. So we're going to say home underscore form. And we're going to do a border radius. Just get some curvature around here. Border radius. Oh, I spelled border wrong. Border radius. And we're going to pass in 5 pixels to this. And we're going to do padding. And we're going to say 15 pixels. And we're going to do a z-index. So z-index, all this does is it kind of makes it come out of the page. So that's kind of cool. And then we're going to add a background color. Super simple of E9, EB. So it's like kind of a grayish white color. And in our home form control, what we're going to add is we're going to make it a display flex. And what this does is this allows us to kind of fill our, so right now, as you can see, this is kind of short and it's not filling out our entire, even our kind of our suggestion inside of the search, as well as this kind of search button is underneath our form. What we want is kind of this search button to go over to the right and our form to kind of look like a normal form as it does up here. So we need to add some styling to do that. So what we're going to say is that our flex is important. So it's going to overwrite whatever class material UI already has set in these, in this form, right? In this form control. So form control kind of has its own CSS by material UI. So we're kind of going to overwrite this. And we're also going to say that this is also important for our flex direction. So our flex direction is going to make it a row so that this will be a row right here next to here. So that is what we have there. And then now we can also add home underscore input. And we can say this is a flex of 1. And we want to say home underscore icon button. And this will be a flex of 0. So all this is saying is that the input will go and fill more than what's minimally required, and the icon button will just fill what is absolutely required for the content. So this actually kind of judges the div size around it. So now that we added that style, let's actually import this into our home.js file. So let's say home.scss. And once we save, now we have our search bar looking a little bit like it should, but it's not fully looking like it should. So let's see why. Are we missing something here? So let's see. We have our form control submit. Oh, we're missing our form control class. So that's why we missed that. So let's add this class name, and we're going to say home underscore form control. And now once we have that, it should be looking good. All right, sweet. So now our search functionality is basically all set up here. Now all we need to do is we need to connect whatever we search inside of here. So say I search in Naruto, we need Naruto to go into our search function that we created earlier. So as we already have our handle search already set up, as well as we have our input to be taken here, right? So now we need to kind of mix these together. And so I just showed you guys how we use search before. So let's kind of copy this over. So let's copy that over into our handle search function. And let's uncomment this stuff. Let's save that. And let's take in whatever we're going to search as our input actually, instead of anything else. So we're going to just take in whatever input's coming through. And then once we have our input, we can console log the data. So then now, every time we search up Naruto, we should get our data back. And boom, we got our data that we wanted. So now to use this data, what we need to do is we actually need to set the data into our context. So for this context, what I set the data to is we want to set it to anime data. So how are we going to do that? So we need to use this data for our results page, right? So we're getting the data on the home page, but we want to set it for the results page. So how are we going to do that? So instead of console logging the data, actually we can leave the console log on to make sure that we're getting the right data. So now we want to actually use the search context again, but instead we want to get the set data function. So all set data is actually going to set anime data like we talked about before, right? So if we look in our app.js file, we can see that our set data is actually just going to do set anime data, and it's going to set our anime data right here. So using that function, we want to set that data. So set data, and we're going to say data.results. And the reason we're doing results and not just the entire data is you can see as we do another search right here, we say Naruto. We're going to see these results, and all the results are going to say is the actual data that we want. We don't really need. So it says like last page, it says request cache expiry, request cached, and all this extra stuff that we don't really need. We just want kind of the results. So that's why we're going to just save the results, right? So after that, now that we have our data, we actually want to go to a different page. We actually want to go to the results page. So to do this, we actually don't have a way to do this right now, right? So a way to do this is we actually want to use something called use history. So let's get rid of this at the top, use effect. We don't need that anymore. So we're going to call this thing called use history from the React router DOM. So we're going to say use history, and we're going to say from React router DOM. And what this is going to allow us to do is actually redirect our page. So what we want to do is history.push, and we're going to say /results. So now this is actually going to take us to the results page. Actually, we have to say use history here. I just started using history without actually saying what history was. So const history equals use history. So when we say this, now we can use this function that will help us redirect to this page. We want to redirect to the results page now that our data is set, right? So now whenever we search something, now we're going to go to the results page. So let's search Naruto in here. And boom, we actually have an error. Why is that? History push date. Push state is not a function. Why are you not a function? Oh, we just want to push, not push state. I don't know why I said push. All right, so now we can say Naruto, and now we have the data here, right? So now we have our data all set. So now we need to actually display that data. So let's display that data in the results.js here. So before let's do that, let's actually get use effect again and make sure that we have the proper data coming through. Use effect, and let's use effect again, and let's say use effect, and we want to get our search context again. So let's get use context again, use context, and let's also get search context. Import search context from // actually we want to do dot, and then we're going to say context and then search. So now we have our search context, and like we did here, all we need to do is copy this line, const search, and use context, and we'll get our context here, and we can just pass an arrow function again, and we want to say console.log, and we want to say search, and we want to get anime data this time, anime data, right? So now that anime data is all set, and our dependencies again is just search. And that import failed. Why is that? Context search. That should be fine. What's wrong with it? Does not contain export search context. Why? Oh, it's not a default export, so we need to wrap this in curly braces. So now that that is an export, so now that's all set up. So as you can see, there's actually an issue here. There's no data coming through right now. But why is that? That's because since we're fetching from the API, we're actually losing this data every time. So say we want to go back to the homepage. We have this homepage, right? And we click Naruto, and boom, we have our Naruto data coming through this time. However, right when we refresh the page, we actually have no data coming through. So the reason this is because every time we fetch the data, we're fetching it directly from the API, but we're not necessarily storing it anywhere. So say you accidentally refresh the page, the route is going to stay the same, but our data is actually gone. So something really useful that we can use is called local storage. So let's actually go back and use local storage here real quick. So let's use our local storage. So all this is doing is it's going to store it in the browser so we can reference this data in the future, right? So what we want to use is something called local storage.setItem. And this is going to allow us to actually just set a kind of a JSON object, but it's only with strings. So we're only allowed to set strings inside of here. So we're going to say my data. So this is going to be whatever comes up in the results. And we need to convert our JSON object actually to a string. So what we want to do is JSON.stringify. There's a built-in function JSON.stringify, which converts any JSON object to a string. And we're going to say data.results. So now when we use this JSON.stringify function to convert our JSON object into a string, we can then again use the JSON functionality again to convert that string back into a JSON object. So that just makes our life super simple. So now that we have our local storage, so now when we go to results, instead of only loading it from whatever data is getting passed in, we can also check our local storage. In our results, what we want to do is on our use effect, what we want to say is if any of this data is null in our anime data, we want to actually fetch it from the local storage. So what we want to do is we want to say search.animeData, and if this data is undefined, or if the data is actually empty, we want to get it from our local storage. Data.length. So this is going to check if it's empty. So if any of that data is empty, then we actually want to get it from our local storage. So we're going to use a try catch. So the reason we want to use a try catch is because say even our local storage is empty, we just want to say, okay, there's no data in here, basically, right? And so inside of here, all we want to do is we want to say search.setData, and we're going to do json.parse, and we're going to do local storage.getItem, and we're going to say my data, as we discussed earlier. And just because of, say, the data is empty, we don't want to really just display it like an error and just nothing on the page. We want to actually set up another variable checking if the data exists or not. So we're going to say const data exists, and we're going to do set data exists, and we're going to use state again. So as you can see, use state is super helpful and super easy to use. And this one's just going to be a true and false variable to check if data exists or it doesn't exist and see if the page is empty, basically. So after this, we can actually just make sure that our set data exists. And we're going to say, oh, I spelled set data wrong. So set data exists. And we're going to set that to true if we do find it. And we're going to catch an error here. Catch an error. Error. And inside of here, we want to log the error to see what happened, if something does happen. And we're going to set data exists to false, because if there's an error where even the data we fetched is gone and there's no local storage of that, then there is no data that we can get. So we just want to set that to false, right? And so now all we need to do here is we can set a div, and inside of that div we can actually do this JavaScript kind of operator here. So we can, anything we put inside of these curly braces, it can be pure JavaScript. So that's the power of JSX. So we can say data exists and so now we want to have a way to display our results, right? So in this way we can say, so for our data exists, for right now we can just say, we can just pass a string here and we can say data exists, right? But for the future, and what we're going to set up in 1 second here, is we're going to actually set up a component to display if the data does exist. And so if the data exists, all we're going to do is display data exists. And if it doesn't, we're going to actually pass in a pipe or an or, and we're going to say data doesn't exist. And we can just do a super simple string data. Oh wait, we also want to pass in a JSON JavaScript operator here, and we want to say actually we can do this inside of one right now, for right now at least, and then we can say or data does not exist, data does not exist, and boom. So now that we have that all set, as you can see, data exists in our case. And so we want to also, if we want to actually look at this, what we can do is we can also say console.log, and we can also get our anime data. So we can say search.animedata. And so this way we can also just see if our anime data is actually there or not. And boom. Actually, we can actually just put this outside of this if statement here, so that if the if statement runs, we have it there. If the if statement doesn't run, it doesn't matter because we have it outside. So boom, our data is right here. And so let's actually remove that console log from our home page, so we don't need that anymore, because we're gonna only do it on the results. And as you can see, our data is loaded actually from memory, because the first time, like I said, use effect runs when the page initially loads. So as you can see, when the page initially loaded, there's nothing in there. So what it had to do was reference our local storage to see, okay, there's some JSON object in here, so we're gonna load that JSON object. So now as we get to oh yeah, I never even mentioned that this JSON parse is actually parsing that string back into a JSON object. So that's basically how that's working. All right, so next thing that we want to do is actually set up what components we're going to be displaying. And for the results page, we want to actually return a type of list. So let's set up some components in the components folder. So the first thing we're going to set up is called MyAnimeList.js. And again, we can just press RSC and that gives us the little thing here. And then we can just put AnimeList for right now. And we can say save. And the same thing, we want to actually do a separate card for each of these inside of the AnimeList. And so we're going to set up card.js. So all this will be is each individual item that we have from our API, we want to display that as a card. And so we're going to basically just get this as a card. And we're going to say anime card. Boom. And so now we have our two little components set up here. So instead of just displaying data exists, now we can actually just display our component that we want to display. So let's actually just do that. So let's do results. And results, we can close that off. And let's import results. So I'm going to actually put this below the context. So import results. Oh wait, no, not results. We want to import AnimeList. Sorry, not results. AnimeList. AnimeList. And boom. It actually imported it for me. So I didn't even need to do anything. So now we have AnimeList. And instead of doing it like just printing out a text inside of a div, let's make this a little bit nicer. Let's get some material UI going on here. So let's do import box and typography. Let's import both of these at the same time. Let's import box and typography. Typography. And from add to material UI core. And boom, we have those two imported. So all boxes is basically a div, which we can edit kind of the size of that div. And all typography is kind of formatted elements so that the text looks nice. So that's basically the idea of it. Super simple. So we're going to, instead of a div, we're just going to put box because they're basically the same thing, but we can format this box any way we want. So we're going to really do it really simple. We're going to add just a simple margin at the top. And we're going to say a margin top of 2. And instead of saying data does not exist without anything outside of it, we're going to actually add, we're going to actually add a typography around it. So we're going to say typography, and we're going to pass that, and we're going to just put this data does not exist inside of here. And we can actually remove these quotes now since it's inside of a typography. And inside of this typography, we can put like a variant in here. And we can put the variant to maybe an H2. Let's see how that works. And maybe an H4 actually. Let's just make that an H4. And boom. And right now we have data, so all it's going to say is AnimeList because we have data. Say we didn't have data and I just wanted to screw around here. We can set we can actually set this to be false. So let's just do set data exists to false. And we can show that that's working real quick. Data does not exist. Boom. So instead of doing that, obviously we want to show our data. So let's get back to actually creating our anime list now. So let's get into our anime list. So in our anime list, what we want to do now is we're going to do something super quick and easy. So first thing we want to do is obviously import our anime card. Anime card. And we're going to say from./anime card. And now we have anime card in here. And we're going to do import grid list. So all grid list is actually it's a UL, but it's a formatted UL in a way that you can actually display lists of data. So in our case, we actually have a list of data. As you can see, we have all these results. So with these results, what we need to do now is actually be able to display these, right? So what we need to do now is just, instead of AnimeList, we want to use GridList, since it's a list of data. And we want to actually map all the data we got from the props. So we haven't actually passed in any props yet. We need some props in here. So instead of just doing AnimeList here in our results, what we want to pass is actually the data that we're getting back from our search, right? So we want to pass in data equals whatever data we got. So we got our search.anime data, right? So now that we have our search.anime data passed in as a prop here, so it's in our props. And so now inside of our actual anime list, where did it go? Anime list. So now inside of our anime list, now that we have the actual data, what we want to do is we want to use this function called map. So we're going to get props.data.map. And inside of here, we want to pass an arrow function. So we're going to say anime, and we're going to do an arrow function, and we're going to, for each of these data points or each of these results, we want to get an anime card. Anime card. And for right now, that's all we need to do. And function call not use keyword. What has happened? Anime list. We're passing anime here. Oh, semicolon. I was like, what's going on? All right, so once you remove the semicolon, it should display. So now we just have a huge list of just random anime cards, which is not actually doing anything. So something real quick that we want to do is, as we can see in our data that's coming back, there's actually a unique ID for each of these data points, and it's called a mal ID. So basically we can just use this mal ID as actually our key, because you can see it's actually giving us an error. And so how React renders a list of items using a map is that it organizes each of these items using the key operator. So basically if you pass in key as a prop here, what that does is it will use this mal ID to reference each of these objects that are coming back. And so how map works is it's basically taking each of these items in our list, and it's gonna break down each of these items so that we get one item at a time, almost as if it's a for loop. So you can imagine that we're doing a for loop in here, and we're almost like printing out, but it's in a way we're gonna be rendering each of these items. So it's going to go through each of the lists and then render each of these items one at a time into each of these anime cards. And so, as I said, React is going to use that almost as an index. You could almost pass in an index as well as the key to these items. So then it knows each item by its key, so it can organize the items properly and re-render them properly. So that's why we need this key property. And so now that we have that all done, there's no errors showing up anymore, and there's just a bunch of anime cards. So now let's get into actually displaying this data. So now let's go into anime card here. So in anime card, we're going to be doing a lot of stuff in here, but let's start out super simple. Let's import our search context, and then from /context search. And then let's also get a few material UI imports get in here. So typography, link, and paper grid list. So let's get paper, and let's get grid list tile. So grid list tile is basically each individual item of the grid list that we had previously. So we have a grid list here. Grid list tile will be each individual item. You can imagine it like an LI, like a list like a list element in a UL or an OL, you can imagine. And we're going to get that from Material UI Core. And we haven't used any of these yet. So all we're going to do is we're actually going to just pass it in here. And we're going to do a grid list tile. And inside of the grid list tile, let's add a grid. And we're going to do this a container. And it'll be an item. So container item, all this does is it will actually just take up the space needed to just hold in the content. It won't take any extra space. So that's why we want to make it a container item, not just a regular item in our case. So, and then we're going to make it so that the content width is actually 12. This doesn't matter terribly too much, but this is just kind of a design thing. And inside of here, we want to add a paper. So we kind of get kind of a card looking thing going on. And inside of that paper, what we want to do is we want to add an image, and we're going to set the source equal to actually an image URL. So how are we going to get this image URL? So we're going to look back at our data, and each of our data points has an image URL right here. So let's actually destructure this object and get an image URL out of this. So let's get a few things out of here. We can get our title, and so let's do const, and let's get title first, and let's do props dot anime dot title dot length, and yeah, so we'll just get that for right now, and then let's get our image URL, const image URL, and then this will be props dot anime dot image URL, and then let's also get let's get a synopsis real quick. All the synopsis is a super quick description of what's going on, so let's also get that data. So let's do const synopsis equals props dot anime dot synopsis. I forgot an N on both of these guys. So synopsis, and so that should be all good. And all we're missing is, what are we missing? Oh, we're missing the end of this image tag. So let's just close that off for right now. All right, so now that we have our data from kind of our object, our props that we're getting in, actually we need to pass in props here. And on our anime list, we already have the props passed, which is anime equals anime. So now we got that back, and we're referencing that props.anime to get each of these items. So this is actually not image URL, it's underscore URL on this actual object here. And yeah, again, I don't have my source yet, so obviously it's going to give me an error. So let's add a source. Let's add our image URL. Image URL. So let's add that. Let's add an alt because it's just going to be mad at me if I don't add an alt. Let's add the title as the alt, and let's do a style, and let's set max height. Max height equal to 300 pixels. That'll be super easy right now. All right, so now we're actually getting stuff to display. So now we have each of these. They don't really look like anything special right now, but that's pretty cool for so far. So now we just need to style it a little bit more, and obviously display the title and stuff like that to make it more of a card look and more kind of like a website look. Let's get that going here. So under this paper, let's actually add this typography here. So let's do typography. So like I said before, all typography is basically just a styled element. So it's nothing crazy at all. It's nothing special. It's just going to be like an H5 or whatever, but only thing styled is basically the font. So we're just going to be using Material UI font on this. So we're going to use a variant H5, but we're going to call it a component of an H2. Why does this matter? It doesn't really matter, except what the HTML itself is gonna do when it renders. It's gonna call it actually an H2 element. So we can actually look at this right now once we render this. So now that our actually typography actually got messed up there. All right, typography. Oh, let's remove that. There we go. Now typography is all good. So, oh wait, we don't want the length here. I don't know why I put length there. All right, so we're gonna use that length in a second actually. But now that we did that, actually this typography should be inside of the paper. Let's actually do that as well. And so like I was talking about before, if we actually click on each of these links, what it does is it'll show you that the component is actually an H2, but because of Material UI, it only looks like an H5. So if we actually change the variant back to an H2, H2s, as you can see, look a lot bigger. But what Material UI does is it actually resizes that element into the element that you want, right? So it'll take an H2, but it'll actually turn it into an H5, which is super cool that Material UI does this kind of automatically. So let's get into the next part. So let's say typography again, and let's say variant of body 2. Body 2 is basically similar to a paragraph, something like that. And then we're gonna say component. This again doesn't really matter. I'm just gonna call it an H2, and I'm gonna say a paragraph, and I'm gonna call that true here. And let's close that, and then let's pass in our synopsis, and let's pass that in, and boom. Wait, this isn't looking like what we want, right? So basically what's ending up happening is that even though we have this thing called grid container item, which kind of forces the box to only take up as much space as it needs, what's happening is that these kind of synopses are so long that it's making it look longer than it actually needs to be. In reality, if we make this synopsis just as big as the picture, it will actually be kind of a perfect size to what we want. So let's actually do some editing to how we're actually displaying these title and synopsis, because sometimes the title is also kind of a little bit longer than what we want, right? So even with these every now and then, so you can see like this title is actually really long, and we don't really want that long of a title. So let's kind of edit these properties. So now let's actually use the length. So let's do length here. And let's do, if the title length is greater than 20, what we want to do is we're going to use this ternary operator, which is a question mark. And we're going to do some string interpolation again. And we're going to say $, and we're going to do props.anime, and we're going to do .title, and we're going to use the substring operator, substring, to only get part of our substring. So it'll only get 1 through 15. Obviously, we should do if it's greater than 15. Why are we doing if it's greater than 20? All right. So if it's greater than 15, we're going to do 1 through 15, and we're going to do ... And right away, what that does is we actually don't have our backup. So instead of just the 1 through 15, if it's smaller than 15, what we want to do is props.anime.title, and we just want to get just the title itself. There's no problem. And so now, as you can see, if the title is larger than 15, what it's going to do is it's going to kind of shorten it down. But instead, let's actually get it 20. And if it's larger than 20, then we want to only get the 20. And this kind of looks a little bit better than what we wanted. Maybe we do want it actually to be 15 here. So if it's larger than 20, we only want it to be 15. Actually, no, let's put it back to 20. That's fine for right now. And so now that that's all set, we also want to do the same with the synopsis. As you can see, the synopsis is way too long. So let's do something very similar. So let's get the dot length on this as well. And if that length is greater than 30, what we want to do is again use the ternary operator, and we're going to do backticks, and then we're going to do $, and pass in props .anime.synopsis, and we're going to do .substring, and we want to get the first 30 characters out of that. And then if it's not, all we want to do is just display the synopsis, props.anime.synopsis, and boom. Let's see how that's looking so far. And boom, looks like the cards are looking a lot better here. And I think actually 15 is just a good size. So let's just use 15 here. Greater than, let's do greater than or equal to 15. And then let's do 15. And boom. And that looks like it's going well over there. So let's just do greater than 15 at this point. And looks like that is actually doing really well for so far for these cards. So now, as you can see, the cards are just kind of lumped together. We kind of want to just fix that spacing a little bit. So now we're going to add some styling to that spacing. So let's add some quick styling to here. Let's separate this out a little bit more. So let's fix the spacing on this. So let's add some class names here. So what we're going to do is class name, and we're going to set this to anime card underscore container. And then we're also going to call this one this paper, and we're going to pass a class name. And we're going to set that equal to anime card underscore paper. And then we're also going to, I think that's it right now. So for right now, those are the only two stylings we need. So let's go to the components. Let's add a file here, and let's call it anime card.scss, and enter. And inside of this anime card SCSS, what we want to do is we want to do our anime card underscore container, and we want to do a margin of 10 pixels, and boom, that's done. And then so now we want to go to our anime paper, and we're going to say anime card underscore paper, and here we want to create a display flex. So we want to make sure that our items are actually aligned within here. So we kind of have our title and our synopsis. Oh, actually in our synopsis, I realize I'm missing our ... Let's add that real quick. All right, so now that's added. So let's go back here, and we're going to do a display flex, and we're going to make sure that all these items are actually aligned in here. So we're going to do all that stuff: align content, align items, justify content, and flex direction. And let's set all of these right now. So align items, and we're going to do center, align content, and we're going to do center, and then we're going to do justify content and center, and we're going to do flex direction, and we're going to make sure that it's a column. And lastly, we're going to add some padding, and the padding will be 10 pixels. Let's save that. And lastly, we're going to do anime card underscore paper, and we want to add a hover. This doesn't really matter, but I just thought it's fun. So let's do a background color, and let's make it light gray when you hover over it. And let's do opacity of 0.8 when you do hover over it. And boom. Once that's all set, let's import it into our file here, /anime card.scss, and boom, let's save that. Let's see how that's looking so far. And as you can see, it looks way better than before, and as you hover over it, it kind of looks a lot cooler. So boom, that looks way better already. So now that that's looking all good, let's see what else we can add here. Yeah, let's do some real quick styling additions to this. Yeah, so as you can see, once I closed up kind of the console here, it's just loading all the items, and the items look pretty nice. They're looking pretty clean here. So now all we want to add left to the anime card is actually a link, and that link will actually take us to get more information about each of these items. So let's do that. So let's go back and let's add a link under our typography here. And this link will be a component of a button, and it'll be a variant of a body 1, and it'll be a style. We're just gonna put a quick style on it. We're gonna do margin bottom equals 0. And then we're going to do an on-click. And we're going to do an on-click handler. On-click handler. Super simple. Super basic title. Kind of funny. Alright, and then let's close up that link. Actually, let's make it a real link. And then let's put learn more about that. And we don't have an on-click handler right now, so it's complaining to me. So let's add an on-click handler above all this stuff. So const on-click handler, and let's set that to an arrow function. And since now that exists, it won't give me an error anymore, but it'll now give me learn more. So now when we click on learn more, it doesn't do anything just yet, but it will do something. So let's create this on-click handler here. So now once we click on one of these items, all we want to do is we want to actually go to the single view page. So we want to actually get more info on each of these, right? On each of these cards. So what we want to do is in the on-click handlers, we want to get more info about what this card is, right? So what we can do is actually reference back to the API and get singular data on what is actually coming back. And we also want to redirect to the single view page. So let's actually get our const history back here. And equals use history. And I think you guys remember where that comes from. It comes from React router DOM. Let's actually put use history right under React, because I like formatting it like that. It's just a better way to keep organized. And so now we have use history imported here. Let's also get our search context. So let's get const search and equals use context and get that in here. And then we're going to say search context. And let's get that in here as well. And let's pull all that in, and use context did not get pulled in. Let's get that use context from React. So now we have that all set up. We don't need grid list here, it looks like, and boom. So now that all that is set up, let's get some spacing here. And inside of our on-click handler, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a fetch, and we're gonna do an interpolated string. And we're gonna say HTTPS, and let's just copy this over here. You guys can see it. So let's copy this over. So we're gonna hit the anime endpoint again, but we're actually gonna pass in this malID, and what this malID is gonna do is it's gonna go to that specific link that we want to click. So say we want to click on the OG Naruto, and we want to learn more about it. It's gonna pull data specifically about OG Naruto and not like Naruto Shippuden, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to that specific ID for only Naruto and get that specific data. And once we get that data, we want to do it then. So again, we're gonna wait for the promise to come through and actually get us our data. So we're gonna say response, and we're inside of this response, we're gonna do a response.json. So we're gonna convert it to JSON, And then once we convert it to JSON, we're going to add another then. And we're going to pass an arrow function into here again. We're going to do data and arrow function. And let's do that. And right now, let's format it a little bit. And if you guys were wondering, I have on save reformatting, and that extension is just, I think I have Prettier installed for this. So, and all that is Prettier installed. And I just, every time I save, it's just formatting on save. So next thing I'm going to do is actually set search dot set single. So set single is something that we set back in our search context. If we go over here, set single, and all this is doing is it's setting our data for our single view, right? And so for our single view, what we want to do is we want to set whatever data is coming back from this response. And we're also going to do our local storage trick again. So our local storage trick, so remember, if we're on the single view and we refresh the page accidentally, we don't want to just see nothing. We want to see what we actually search for. So we want to set single data, and we're going to do JSON.stringify, and we're going to do data. Boom. And we're going to use history.push again to go to our single view. So we're going to do history.push, and then we're going to go to our single view. Boom. And so now we have everything actually set up. So whenever we click on something, we're actually going to go directly to the single view. So it's as simple as that. So now in our results, we can actually remove that console.log. We don't need that anymore. We actually want to put a console.log in our single view now. So we will get back to that in 1 second. Let's go to our anime card again. So let's go through this flow one more time so you guys understand. So we're going to do a fetch, and we're going to do a then. So we're going to wait for the promise to go through so we actually receive our data on the response. And then we're going to turn our response into JSON. Oops, I didn't want to do that. We're going to turn our response into JSON. And then once we have our JSON response, we're going to then use that data. We're going to set our data to our single view data. And then we're also going to store that into our local storage. And then we're going to also just go to our single view now, right? So now that we have that all set up, we can now go to our single view. And let's do a quick use effect. So we can see, we can make sure our data is coming through again. Use effect. And then let's get our search context going again. So as we did before, let's just snag it from over here. Search context. Let's snag that over here. And then let's also get use context. So we have those quick things here. So now let's do const search equals use context, and we wanted to get our search context into here, search context, and boom, now we have search context. So now we can use effect, and instead of use effect, we can do the arrow function, pass that through, and then we want to put our dependencies of search, and then let's do a quick console.log of our search data. So let's do search dot single data. Boom. So now we have all our data set up. So whenever I click on Naruto, it should go to my single view, and in our console, let's see if our data is coming through in this object. Boom. Now we have all our data. We have our episodes and whatever. So now we have our data coming through. Let's actually get into what we're going to plug into this single view here. So on single view, we don't have anything actually coming through right now. So what we need to do is, like before, we actually need to check if this data is actually coming through, or did we actually refresh the page, right? So again, if we refresh the page, we're actually going to get nothing. We're going to get this empty object. So we need to check if we're actually getting data, and if we're not, we need to pull that from local storage like we did before, right? So we can remove this console.log right now, or we'll actually just keep it there for right now. And we're going to get an if statement, and inside of this if statement, we're going to do a search.single data, and we're going to say equals 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 undefined. So if it's undefined, or we're going to do an or statement, or if the object coming back, object.keys, and we're going to set search.single data. If that length of the keys is equal to 0, then we actually want to go through this, right? So now let's put that inside of here, and then now inside of here we're going to do the try catch again. So we're going to do the try, and then we're going to catch the error here, catch error, and we're going to pass in that. All right, so now in the try, similar to what we did before, we want to do the search.single data, or no, we want to set single, sorry. We want to set single. So again, we're going to set this to whatever is in local memory if no data is getting passed through. So we're going to parse that data. Again, it's a string that's getting stored in local memory. So we're going to get our local storage dot get item, and we're going to get single data, what we set in there. Boom. So single data is now set, and then we want to also set if our data exists or not. So let's create a constant here, if our data exists, and we can actually just do exactly the same thing. Data exists, data exists, and set data exists. Set data exists. And then once we got set data exists, we can do use state, and we can set that to true. And boom, let's initially set data exists. Again, I spelled data wrong again. Set data exists, and we're going to set that to true if we do find it in local memory. If not, we're going to set console.log, and we're going to set that, we're going to print out that error, and then we're also going to do set data exists to false. And boom. Now we have made sure that all our data is going to come through properly, no matter what. So similar to before, what we want to do is in our single view, we just want to, inside of our div, we want to kind of output a component, right? If our data exists. So let's create another component. We're going to create a component called single anime.js. So let's create that component, single anime.js. So let's do an RSC, and let's just type in single anime for right now, single anime. And inside of our single view, what we want to do again is just check if our data exists, and if it does, then we want to output single anime, and if it doesn't, we want to basically just print out, what is it called? No data exists, right? So we're going to do data exists, and then we're going to do an and we're going to do single anime, and we can close that. And if it doesn't, we're going to pipe it, and we're going to say print out this typography. Let's grab a typography, close that, and no data exists. And let's again make this like an h4 variant equals h4, and then we can do component. This again doesn't really matter at all. There's like nothing to do with anything, but I'm just gonna do it for sakes of this video. And so now it should be printing single anime here, because we have the data coming through as it shows on the side in our console, because we're printing it out here. All right, so now that that data is printing out, we can actually go into our single anime file right here and start printing that and start creating this card here, these cards in this single anime view. So in our single anime view, we're gonna get a bunch of data out of here. We're gonna get a bunch of different things. Let's see if we can actually destructure this object. If not, I'm gonna just do this. So let's do const and destructure this object. We're gonna do title, and we're gonna do image URL, and we're gonna do rating, and then we're gonna do airing, and then we're gonna do broadcast, and then we're gonna do score, and then we're gonna do URL, and then we can just do props.info. And we don't have a props. We didn't pass props yet. Let's pass these props in here. Let's pass info equals. So we're gonna do is info equals search dot single data, and that's all we have in the props. And then in our props we have equals info. Let's see if this works. Yeah, that's what we should use. Use effect. Pass that in. Props.info. And if that changes, then we want to pass in console.log, and then we're going to do title and image URL, and just see if that destructuring actually works or not. It did work. That destructuring did work. So now we destructured that, and our data is coming out properly. So all destructuring does is it takes our object. So we can see our object here. We can see all these different properties, and all I need to do is actually reference these properties in this constant object that I'm taking. And once I take this constant object, I can reference each of these keys from the object, and what it'll do is it'll actually take that into these constants that I just pulled out. And so then now that I have that, I can actually use them as the constant that I just pulled out of the object. So I just pulled these out of props.info. And we don't need to destructure that in our animate card because we did all this editing to the different properties. So it's just easier that we just pulled them out individually rather than in here. We're not really going to be editing any of these properties, so I can just destructure them and pull them out right away. Now that we have all these properties, let's start using them in our grid. So let's create a grid, and it's going to be kind of a huge, massive grid, but it'll be cool. So let's do it. It'll be cool. Let's do this. All right, so let's get the grid from import grid from material UI at material UI core. Let's get this grid, and then let's also get typography up in here. Typography. And then what else do we need? I think, and we need paper and also a link. Okay, let's get link from, where am I getting link from? Also here. So let's do paper as well. Paper and link. All right, so now we got all that stuff. Let's pass this in as a grid here. And inside of this grid, we're gonna be calling this a container, and we're gonna have a spacing equal to 10, which is the max spacing you can do. And we're gonna do direction equals row because we're gonna show basically the image on the left and the kind of the information on the right. Let's also get one more piece of information. Let's get these episodes. I think this episode's number. So let's get that episodes. Let's get this number here. Let's get episodes. Let's get that. And let's do direction is equal to row. And justify. We're going to do all this centering stuff. Justify equals center. And we're going to do align content, align items equals center, and we're going to do align content equals center, and then we're going to, and yeah, that's it for right now. So we did all that stuff. All right, so then now instead of our grid, what we're gonna do is we're gonna slowly one by one, we're gonna be passing in each of these variables that we just pulled out, right? So we just pulled out all these content. Let's start plugging them in. So let's do it in a paper. Instead of a paper, and we're gonna set this paper's elevation to 3. So all that's doing is it's just gonna make it come out of the page a little bit, make it look a little bit cooler. So then let's do typography. And instead of this typography, let's just pass in the title for right now. And this typography will be a variant, and that variant will be in H4. And the component will be in H2 again. This again literally doesn't matter, but I'm just doing it just because you can do it. So let's basically just repeat this how many ever times. We need to repeat this like 7 times, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Actually, yeah, so exactly we need to repeat this 7 times. So we can again click Alt Shift and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so now we got 7 typographies here. And so now we can just keep changing these. So now it's going to be airing. And we can pass in the airing time here. Airing. And then we can also get our score. And we can pass in score here. And then we can get broadcast. And then we can pass broadcast here. And then we can pass rating. And then put rating here. All right, and then we can take our episodes. That's what we need. Episodes. And we can say episodes. And plug that in. And I realize these last 2 are not needed. We just need a link now. Link. And inside of this link, we're also going to call this component. And we're going to say it's a button. And we're going to do a variant equals body1. And then we're going to say href. And our href is going to be our URL that we just got. And we're going to kind of put a mask on this. And we're going to say it's the MyAnimeList URL. So it takes it. People want even more information than what we're supplying, they can go directly to the website itself. So use effect is missing dependencies. What is it missing? The proper way to do this would be title and image URL, since we pulled it out, so we can reference them directly right there. And so that's looking super ugly right now. That's great. Oh, that's because all we have is our paper right now. So I realize that all these are not H4s as well. So let's make these H5s because they're looking a little bit too big. So let's make those H5s. H5s and H5s. Let's save that. All right, so that sizing is looking a lot better for me. Airing looks like it's not displaying because it is not a string. It's actually a boolean. So let's try to do it here. So let's see if I can do it. So string, and then let's pass that. That should work because it's JavaScript. And boom, it's not airing anymore because it's Naruto. It ended a while ago. All right, that is cool. So now that we have that set up, let's actually split this into 2 grids here. So basically I want to show the description and information on the right, and I want to show the rest of the stuff on the left. So let's actually just pass in a grid around here. Grid. So let's break it into 2 parts here. Let's put a grid here around this paper, and then let's also get a grid around this image because we're not showing the image right now either. So inside of here, let's actually pass in the image. Let's get an image, and then we're gonna do source equals image URL, and we're gonna say the alt is equal to the title, and we're gonna say class name We're gonna pass in a class name because we need to do some styling, and we're gonna do single anime underscore underscore image. And let's do that for right now. All right, so this is our image. We're gonna add some styling in a second to that image, as well as to our paper. So let's do this first. Let's call this an item. And let's also add item to this item. And now let's also add some styling to, all right, so now these are shown up a little bit better once we added item to them, because now they're actually showing within the container properly. So this is the container, and then once we added item, right when you remove that, it looks kind of weird because it doesn't know what to do with these. So it's gonna push it up beyond where the actual grid is. So let's put those back. So now that that's showing properly, let's add some styling to the paper itself. So let's do this. So let's do class name equals single anime, and we're gonna do description. So let's add some styling here. Let's actually add styling to the grid. Oh no, let's do it directly to this element. All right, so we're gonna add some styling there, and yeah, so that's all the styling we're gonna add right now. And let's go to the components, and we're gonna go to single anime.scss, boom. And then in single anime.scss, all we need is .single anime underscore underscore container. Why do we need this container thing? Do I have one on this? Oh yeah, let's add that. Oh yeah, so we need also one more styling here. We want to do class name equals single anime, and then underscore underscore container. All right, so now when we go back to single anime, so let's do this, single anime underscore underscore container. And all I'm gonna do here is I'm going to do a margin from the top. So we have a little bit of margin from the top. Let's do that margin top. And I'm gonna call that 50 pixels, 50 pix. And I'm gonna make that important. So I'm gonna overwrite our material UI stuff here. Important. So now how that's looking from here should be looking good. Oh, it's not looking good yet. Oh, because I haven't imported that yet. So import / single anime .scss. So now, boom. So now that's a little bit lower, looking better. All right, so let's continue styling on. So now all we need to do is for the image, so single anime underscore underscore image. All I'm gonna do is add a little border radius here, border radius. And we're gonna do 10 pixels on that. And so now this image is looking a little bit nicer. I added a little bit border radius to it just to make it look cool. And then we're gonna do single anime and the description. Single anime and underscore underscore description. And we're gonna set a max width. And the max width is gonna be 400 pix. And boom, that's just to make it go down a little bit, and we're gonna add a little bit of padding here, and we're gonna add 20 pixels of padding. All right, and boom, it's looking very nice and clean there. And that's the main functionality right there of our entire application. So the only things we need to change now is actually our main navigation, and that's all we need to do. So everything is actually working perfectly fine. It's just you can't really go back home right now because there's no way to get back home. And only way to go back home is obviously going from the top route. So let's change that up a little bit and fix our main navigation, and we'll be basically done with our entire application. So we're almost in the home stretch here. So let's get to the main navigation now. All right, so in our main navigation, all we're gonna be doing is kind of basically the same stuff as we did before, but we're gonna be doing it a little bit differently. Well, actually, it's basically gonna be the exact same as our home page, right? So we're just gonna be doing that in this search bar, as well as we're gonna remove this little drop down. We don't really need it. We don't have anything in there, as well as we're gonna change this title here. So let's get to it. So for changing the title, we can do that right away. So instead of material UI, we want to say this is anime list viewer. All right, so anime list viewer right away, boom, anime list viewer looking better. So something we also want to change is getting rid of this little toolbar. So we don't really need this open drawer thing going on here. So we don't really need that. So we can actually just plop that out of here and keep the toolbar stuff actually. So now the drawer is gone. We don't need that drawer. We're all good with that. And we can also add a link. So what we want to do is we want to add a link from material UI core. So there's a lot of extra stuff that they did here. So let's actually break it down a little bit better from what they did. So from core, they basically got all of these things. So we can actually just pull them directly instead of wasting all this space that we have here. So let's get all these imported in the same line. So let's get app bar, and then let's get toolbar, and then let's also get icon, button, and let's do that from at material UI core, and let's remove these, and let's also get typography from here, typography, and let's get rid of all these imports right here. Boom, that saved us a lot of stuff right there, and that should be good. So boom, that's all looking the same. So let's also see if we can merge these two right here. Actually, I don't think we can merge the icons, but we should be able to get our fade and styles, actually fade and make styles from here as well. And let's do that. Oh, input base is not defined. Let's also get that. Input base. Right, yeah. So let's get that. Boom. So that is all we really needed right there. Icon button, I do not need icon button, looks like, for some reason. I don't need that, and menu icon I don't need as well. So menu icon, I don't need you. I don't need you as well. So boom, so now it's looking a lot better. We made our imports a lot smaller because we had a lot of extra random imports. So we made that all clean. So let's now get to actually making this search bar functionality work. And we've done this at least 50 times already. Well, not really 50, but you guys get the idea. So let's get our history from our React router DOM. And so let's get history. And let's see, equals use history. And boom, that's good. And then let's get const search, and that'll be equal to use context, and use context will do search context. And then let's also handle the input. So let's say const input exactly the same as we do on the home page. And then we're going to do set input here. Exactly the same. So that's no problem. Use state, and then we're going to put that as empty. So that is almost exactly the same as what we do from there. So now let's get to this actual input base. So in our input base, only thing we need to add is value equals input here. And we're going to say also we're going to have an onChange event exactly as we do on the home page. And here we're going to pass in our event. And then we're going to do set input. And then we're going to do event.target.value as we did before. And then we're also going to do an onSubmit handler. So what we're going to do instead is convert this div. That's all I did. So we're going to convert this div to a form. That makes your life easier. So that keeps all the styling the same. And we're going to have an onSubmit here. We're going to have an onSubmit handler. And we're going to say, we're basically going to just call that handle search. Handle search. And handle search obviously doesn't exist yet. So let's create a handle search here. And let's call it const handle search equals event. And we want to pass that. And we're going to do event.prevent default here again. Prevent defaults. So the page doesn't refresh. And then we're going to do search. Search, and then we're going to pass in our input almost exactly the same as what we did on the home page. And then we're going to do then, and then we're going to do data, and we're going to pass this data in so we can set our set data for our results. And then we're going to do data.results. And then once we have the results, we want to also just set that to local storage as we do .set item as we do on the home page, so we can reference this if someone refreshes data. And we want to do JSON.stringify that data.results. And then we're going to set input to empty. So we're going to make sure that input field is empty. And then we're going to push ourselves to the results page. And boom, our entire app is basically done now. So let's make sure that all this functionality is working properly. Wait, let's add this link around our title here so we can go home from wherever we are. So let's add this link. So let's add this real quick. So let's add that link, and then we're going to say 2 equals this /, and then we're going to pass in class name equals classes dot title. And then we're going to actually remove this from here. Link is not defined. So let's get that from React Router DOM. Let's get our link here. And with this link, what we're going to do is we're going to have an actual. So with this, what this does is if I go to results, let's see results. Alright, so instead of href for this link, we actually want to set this to a 2. And then, so now when we click on this, boom, it just takes us back without actually refreshing the page. So then now I can hit Naruto here, and it goes to Naruto, but then when I go back, it doesn't actually refresh the page. So we want to use the React Router DOM link instead of actually the Material UI link. So let's do that. And let's remove that stuff. All right, so Now our entire functionality is working. So say I hit Naruto here and Naruto is loading up. Let's close out this console so we can look at this properly. So now Naruto pulls up. So say if I search up One Piece here, boom, One Piece shows up. One Piece's cards are kind of funky, but that's good enough for us right now. And then I can also go back to Naruto if I want. And then if I want to view more information, so I want to view more information about Naruto Shippuden, I can click on it and boom, Naruto Shippuden information comes up. It's PG-13, guys, so watch out. Just kidding. And it's 500 episodes. So this is awesome. And then we can click on the MyAnimeList link, and that doesn't go anywhere. That is one thing we should fix right now. So let's go fix that. So let's go to single anime, and then let's go to link, and then the href isn't working here. So let's take a look if this href is actually loading a link here. And this is not loading a link. So this link is, again, a material UI link. So instead of a material UI link, let's again use a React router down link. So let's do import, and then link from React router down, and then let's go to an href. Yeah, instead of href, let's do a 2. And that doesn't work either. How about this? Instead, let's do a typography. And then let's do an A tag inside of here. An A tag. Let's close that A tag, and then we're gonna do MyAnimeList. And then we're gonna do an href in here. Href. And then we're going to set that href to URL. And then that should solve all our problems here. Link is undefined. Yeah, we don't need that anymore. Let's set that. Let's go to Naruto. And let's see more information about Naruto. Let's click on MyAnimeList. And does it take me there? Boom. Takes me to MyAnimeList. And if I go back to single view, it loads up where I exactly was. And this loads up where I exactly was, and boom, we're all done. And yep, and we're all done, guys. Hope you like this app. And that's all I got, guys. Like and subscribe for more. And the next video I'm going to drop is the Facebook Messenger extension for Google Chrome, so you want to check that out. Peace.